And we welcome in our Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, to join us here on a kind of a monthly visit. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. Doing great. How are you?
Well, I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. We're looking around America right now. COVID America, I'm starting to call it. And we're seeing the numbers going up. We're seeing a lot of different states which are backing up on some of their reopenings, states like Texas and Florida. We're seeing a lot of big numbers. What's your take on the whole COVID thing right now? Obviously, we're looking for a vaccine. When that comes, we'll be a lot happier nation. But at the moment, we have a lot of exclamation points that have turned into question marks around the country. Your thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think there's no question there's been a surge in some places that is problematic. They tend to be very localized, but there are some big cities that have, quite big numbers. I think the numbers to watch are not really just the number of people testing positive, because we're doing a lot more testing. So
right.
Inevitably we'll discover more. The test doesn't cost the virus, right? It discovers what's out there. What matters, though, is hospitalizations, and especially ICU and fatalities. And the good news is, throughout the vast majority of the country, again, there are exceptions, but the vast majority of the country, we're nowhere near capacity. We have a declining fatality rate. We're better able to treat this than we used to be. Just basic things, like we've learned that it's really generally not a good idea to put a person on a ventilator. That can often do a lot of harm for a COVID patient.
Right.
So that's being used much less frequently, and that's helping to save lives. And look, in Pennsylvania, the numbers are extremely low. It's been many months since we were in any danger at all of overwhelming a hospital system in Pennsylvania, and we're not now. So my bottom line is we need to proceed with the reopening. People should, of course, be careful. If you're in the vulnerable population, you should stay away from groups of people where you could be at risk. And the rest of us should wear a face mask when we're out in public, interacting with people, by all means. Use the physical distancing that makes it very, very difficult for the virus to spread. Hand washing, the precautions that we all know about, that's going to work over time. And as you point out, we are every day getting closer to more effective therapies and eventually a vaccine. So we really should be getting back to our livelihoods.
As you work with your colleagues right now in the Senate, what are the things that are on your plate at the moment? Maybe not just with COVID, but with some of the other things too, moving forward here in terms of helping small business, for example, helping business in general in the country to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, one of the things we've got to decide is, do we need yet another bill, right? We have passed 4 major pieces of legislation. We've appropriated about $3 trillion and then authorized the Federal Reserve to lend another, call it $3 or $4 trillion. The number is it can vary, but several trillion more. Much of that has not yet even gone out the door. It all adds up to a staggering number, Gary, and there's no free lunch, right? I mean, if there were,
right,
then we should just send everybody $1 million check, and that'd be wonderful. Obviously, that doesn't work. So we've got to decide what needs to be done, if anything. Do we have to make any tweaks to the PPP, the loan program whereby the government pays the payroll for small businesses? That program basically expired and wasn't fully utilized. I'm on a oversight commission to examine the lending programs to big business. Interestingly, very little of that has been drawn on. Most big businesses were able to borrow money from their banks or by issuing corporate bonds, and so there hasn't been a need for that. So, I just want to systematically go through this. The other thing, 2 other points that I think are worth making very briefly. One is that economic data seems to suggest very strongly that the decline of the economy was not as severe as we thought, and the recovery so far has been very, very rapid. So that's very good news as well. So I think we should take a long, hard look at the details before we decide to spend trillions of more dollars on top of the ones we already have spent.
We're talking with Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. Senator, do you have a sense as you talk to people around the state and around the country, I would dare say, as to how this nation is going to change after this COVID-19? There's a lot of people saying, for example, brick and mortar stores are going to suffer radically, that some trends that were started in terms of our buying habits and the way we, supply and demand in this country have been kind of exacerbated and have been pushed along quicker. You're a guy that's been in business for a long time. Do you have any sense about some of the changes that we're going to see, or is it too early to really kind of assess that?
I think it's hard to know which changes will be really enduring and which will be transitory. So, for instance, I think the restaurant industry is taking a devastating blow right now, and it may take a long time to recover, but eventually people go out to eat not just for the food, but for the whole experience. And so I think restaurants will come back, but it could take a long time. I do think we've probably learned that we are able, a lot of folks are able to work from home at a higher level of productivity than we might have guessed. Obviously, that doesn't work for everybody, but
right.
A significant number of people who work in an office can really work effectively from home. So that might mean fewer people going into an office setting every day than we were accustomed to. But even there, it's hard to tell how long that will endure.
As a result of the George Floyd death, we've had a cultural upheaval in this country who have raised issues, and we've seen thugs. We've seen anarchists. We've seen people who have decided to burn things, burn flags, tear down statues, throw them in harbors, as we saw in Baltimore, for example. We've seen different kinds of things. What's your thought about the cultural upheaval that we're seeing in this country right now, and the damage or the good that it's doing for the country as we move forward?
Well, I got to tell you, I'm very concerned about the damage of lawlessness. And it's very hard to overstate how devastating to a society it is if you tolerate destruction and riots and lawlessness. Look, peaceful protests are part of the American DNA and perfectly legitimate, and we all acknowledge that, whether or not we agree with the message of a given protest. If it's peaceful, you got a right to assemble. You got a right to make your case. But there is no case for violence and rioting and destruction.
No.
And this whole cancel culture. Let's be clear what this is. This is a direct assault on the freedom that is the underpinning of our entire society. Cancel culture is about coerced conformity, right? You must conform with the opinion of those who would silence you, or else you'll be driven out of civil society. Yeah. I mean, it's really outrageous. We need to be able to have a discussion, to have a debate, have disagreements. But the idea that one side gets to silence the other side, that's not okay.
Well, and one of the things that I worry about is the idea of having that discussion, because in order to have it, you have to be listening. And a lot of the people who are doing this right now, it's a hit and run kind of, not a conversation, but a hit and run kind of exchange that we're getting, where they hit you with, okay, you're this, and this, and if you don't believe that, then your opinion doesn't count. As opposed to sitting down and deciding how we move this nation forward, in as we've always tried to do, in a continually better way. Final comments.
Yeah, well, it's even worse than just not listening to another point of view. It's demanding that a person with a different point of view be fired from his job,
right,
be forced to resign, be excluded from any consideration of a career, a job. I mean, it's really outrageous, and we shouldn't capitulate to the mob.
Senator Toomey, always good having you on the show. We appreciate you taking the time this morning. Be safe, and we look forward to next month.
Thanks for having me, Gary.